Hey all, Sean here. I know I promised the social network, and it is 100% still coming. But recently, Jackson got a better idea on when he'll be going back to Japan, which gave us the confidence to reopen our Patreon for at least a few months. And to entice you all to check it out, we're releasing 2 of our many episodes from our bonus backlog for free. If you want the rest, head over to patreon.com/BADHcast and toss us a couple bucks. For less than the price of a lunch out, you'll get access to every one of our bonus episodes. And for only $10, you can even make us watch a movie of your choice, whatever that may be. Good, bad, silly, heart-wrenching, it's your call. We just have to watch it and talk about it. Check it out now at patreon.com/BADHcast. And right now, enjoy our first ever real bonus episode, What Remains of Edith Finch. Hello, and welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I am your host, Jackson Keller.
And if you are listening to this episode, thank you so much. You are one of our amazing patrons. We really do appreciate you. So here's a wonderful bonus episode for you. This episode was suggested by Julia. So thank you for that, because this was an absolutely wonderful suggestion of What Remains of Edith Finch. It's a game out now. I don't know where this went, but it's a great game, and we both really fucking liked it.
Thank you so much, Julia, for requesting this episode, and thank you so much to the rest of our Colts and Stallions for tuning in, for being the greatest horselings, because you're above the regular horselings, so keep that badge of honor.
the better horselings, and be sure to rub it in their face whenever you can.
And tell them that they, too, could be better horselings by donating more money. All right, let's talk about What Remains of Edith Finch.
Not just fucking try and upsell our own fucking patrons. Like, hey, thank you guys for doing this, but do more.
You could spread the good word. Oh, Christ. So Sean, we already said it's great. I think it's great too. We're still in general zone, non-spoiler zone. We're gonna format this like a regular ass episode. So what do you think in general of this game?
I really fucking loved it. I streamed the whole thing, so if you do want to watch my live opinions of it, you can check that out over my Twitch page. But in general, I thought it worked really, really well. I went in as knowing almost nothing about this game. I know Sam, the girlfriend, had played it like 2 days prior, just on a whim. Like, it was something that she wanted to play for a while now, and just kind of coincidentally played it around the same time as me. And it was like, you're going to fucking love it. It's not what I was expecting either. So I went into it pretty much as blind as I could, and ended with a little more than a little bit of emotion in my voice. It kind of hit me in ways that I wasn't prepared for, and just played in a very unique way, especially for the quote unquote walking sim genre.
Yeah, that was the most striking thing to me about it, because so walking simulators, I kind of want to talk about the whole the discourse surrounding these types of games, because I think walking simulator is a useful enough term, but as we know, it tends to be used as like a pejorative by people who think that real video games must involve murder. And
listen, if it's not Dark Souls difficulty, it's not a real video game. Nothing was risked, nothing was lost. It is a hollow victory.
You lose. You got so much on the line when you play Dark Souls. So it tends to be used as a pejorative. I mean, I tend to think that it's a useful enough distinction on its own. And so that's pretty much all I knew about this game, was that it fell into this category. And I think that the thing that's kind of sad is that the whole conversation around these kind of walking simulator games, it gets so hung up on that, you know, trite, like boring kind of pointless argument of like, like, is it truly a game? Like, is it more comparable to visual novels or visual novels games? And I think that you tend to lose out on a lot of the interesting things that these games are actually doing. Because I think
the answer is basically fuck you missed the point.
Yeah. And so like, but I do think, however, like, to give some credence to some of the critics, I think that there are a lot of walking sims, or at least like the common perception of walking sims from ones that were made a couple of years ago is that they are kind of formulaic in their own way, and that you are just going around in first person, exploring a pretty art environment with some piano music, reading some notes and documents, and, you know, listening to a story of varying levels of quality. You know, the ground zero for these is actually Dear Esther, though I haven't played that game, but like one of the most well-known ones is probably Gone Home, which very much fits into this model. And so, really, though, like, even though that's sort of like the baseline for what a walking sim is, that really ignores the fact that, like, there are a bunch of games coming out that use kind of that formula to do really unique and cool things and sort of take the genre into new places that I feel like, you know, people aren't really talking about because of, again, these stupid you missed the point kind of questions. And so the Beginner's Guide in 2015 is one of them. I highly recommend that game. And indeed, I was really blown away by a lot of the little mechanical touches that What Remains of Edith Finch used, because on the surface, like, if you're going in expecting, you know, dig around an old house and be told a story, that is kind of what you're getting, but it also elevates or rather expands upon the genre through a lot of great, you know, mechanical narrative touches. And I think that if people weren't so dismissive of these kind of games, like, we could see even more exciting developments along these lines. So, yeah, I mean, I like walking simulators, generally speaking. I really liked this, and I think that it's, even if you don't like walking simulators, if you haven't played one in a while, or you weren't impressed by Gone Home or something, I would really recommend you check this one out, because I think it does stuff a little differently, a little more interestingly. So,
yeah, I don't really want to get too much into what the content of the game is yet, just because I do think there is something to keeping that a secret until you actually play it. Like, I did kind of like slowly understanding what the game was getting at. But I do kind of want to talk just a little bit about how you mentioned, like, it's mechanically takes the idea of a walking simulator and expands upon it. And I think the closest comparison I can give you to this, and like, I think this is something that is gonna come across as sounding bad, but just bear with me on it, is there's an element of like Heavy Rain or another David Cage style game where you're kind of forced to do things unpleasant, but you have to continue to watch in order to continue to play it. Like, I think of Heavy Rain when you have to chop off one of your fingers and you have to still look at the QTEs and like follow along with it in order to succeed. And so, like, it's just really unpleasant. It feels like you're actually doing it, and it's grotesque. And while there's nothing in that vein in this, there are moments where basically you're forced to continue playing even with full awareness of what is transpiring, what is about to happen. And it's not just picking up the document and reading, this is how this went down. It's actively engaging in it and feeling kind of sick about the whole action, but not being able to look away because the game forces you to watch. And I think that's something that is really inventive within the genre. And that's why I compare it to a David Cage game. Like, that's just the most clear example of this I have. I probably should find a better example and will in fact probably use this game going forward.
Well, so here's an interesting way to think about it that I'm just remembering now. I really like this terminology because it's kind of pithy, but it's a really like accurate summary. And I think that if like more devs go into a game with this kind of mindset, you could see more cool things like this happening. So in a dialogue, like a back and forth that two Kotaku writers had about it, I don't remember which ones, one of them described the game as narrative WarioWare.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like you kind of see it, don't you? I mean, like, not to. All right. Oh God, I don't know whether I should save this for after spoilers, but there's one part in the game in particular that's very WarioWare-esque that had me laughing out fucking loud. But I'll save it for spoiler talk, I suppose, because if you don't know what's coming, it's a lot more effective and weird and great.
Yeah. No, but like you're definitely right, because it is a lot of changing ideas, and my stream pointed out to me that like basically you have 3 buttons for this whole game, and that is how WarioWare works, and it's picking up what button does what and then doing it.
And on that note, I also really like the controls in this game. I think that goes a long way into making this feel more interactive than a lot of other walking sims, in that you have kind of like the left stick controlling the left side of your body and the right stick controlling the right half, and that'll change depending on the context, and you like pick different things up. So like, you know, while it's this is also kind of like Heavy Rain, in that like even if you want to like, you know, close your journal, that's a pretty like integral part of the game. You have to like push the sticks together for Edith to close it. And like, you know, it's easy to forget considering so many other games have you just press like circle or B or whatever. But the fact that they take that, really like try to emulate how the human body moves on a controller, while like in some games it can be gimmicky. Like I'm remembering like, I think it was Killzone 2 where you had to like twist the 6-axis to open like wheel doors. So like in a lot of games it's really gimmicky, but just because the game no, they did it in Uncharted, didn't they? I think I want to say they did it in one of the Uncharted's. There were probably a couple of like PS3 exclusives that did it, because that was motion controls were the big thing. They're so proud of it. Like that was it was such a good idea, guys. It wasn't the worst part of those games in any stretch of the imagination. It wasn't even the worst part of those games when they were on the Wii, a console designed for motion controls. Don't worry. Oh man, what an era. So like I know that when I say that, like, yeah, that kind of 6-axis gimmicky bullshit is sort of what comes to mind. And I think in a shooter where the primary action is more traditional, like that is part of the reason it seems so distracting. But I think here, just because of the nature of the genre and the context, I think it goes a long way in adding that little element of interactivity to like actually, you know, sort of like, yeah, at one point you have to like open a music box and you twist it around, and like you have to actually use the stick and like get reacquainted with the controls. And yeah, it's like Heavy Rain in that way. It's like WarioWare in that way. Game's just really cool. I will say I played this with a keyboard and mouse, where I got some of what you're talking about, but I didn't necessarily get all of it. I think it might be easier to quickly understand how the game works if you're using a keyboard and mouse, but it sounds like the more fulfilling idea, if you have not played this, would be to play it with a controller. Yeah, I played the PS4 version, so I was just using the standard PlayStation controller, and the setup was pretty much left analog stick controls the left hand, right analog stick controls the right hand, triggers like grab and interact, basically. Yeah, mine was literally the mouse looks around and picks things up, and WASD does WASD things. There wasn't anything super fancy with it, but it was still effective even in like those moments. Like I feel like there's one in particular where I think it worked better for. I'll talk about that, but in general, yeah, I think like there is something to be said for a controller in this. But yeah, the more I think about it, the more I think like the one. We'll come back to that example. It's I put a pin in that. Yeah, but no, I think the other thing too is just like when you ham-fist motion controls and like goofy, you know, mechanics like that into a shooter or something like that, it's especially breaking the pace of the game. So like it just. You're shooting, you're all excited, you're pumped up, and then you're like, no, okay, now you need to stop and then flip your controller around in a certain angle. Whereas this, like, you're already in a slow pace. It's, you know, the quote unquote walking simulators are very much about
atmosphere and ideas more than, you know, shoot face, go hard. So
360 no scope.
Yeah, exactly. So it's way more about the experience. And so you're already prepared in the headspace of just, you know, do it. Like it's what's almost expected, honestly. You're not like, oh man, you're dragging the game to a halt from my action of walking upstairs.
Oh, so I guess on that note, on a non-spoilery note, because I think we're brushing up on the limits of what we can talk about without spoilers. But
oh my god, yeah.
The last thing that I want to say is that the very beginning of the game, having no idea and having played a fair number of walking sims of varying quality, I was not too impressed at the very beginning, if only because I was getting Duke Nukem Forever flashbacks with like the head bobbing, and like just the way the camera sort of shakes. I mean, I'm sure this can be adjusted more in the PC version of the PS4, but and like the movement speed was really slow and you're just kind of going through the woods for a hot minute. And you know, the game when the game shows its hand, like I was pretty much on board immediately. But at first I'm like, all right, trundling through the woods at an incredibly slow pace. Here we go. Like, woohoo, like bobbing up and down.
At least it didn't have the Duke Vision whine to go with it. That'd end it.
Oh God, Duke Vision.
That was a regretful night. Do you want to talk about spoilers?
Let's talk about spoilers.
Well, cool. Before we do, thank you once again to all of our Patreons for listening. You guys are absolutely wonderful. Thank you to Julia for suggesting the game. It was a wonderful, wonderful suggestion for a lot of reasons, most of which we'll talk about in spoilers.
Let's get into spoilers. Let's get into how there's a section very early on in this game where after you have turned into a cat and are chasing a bird along tree branches and doing some light platforming, then you turn into an owl and swoop up some rabbits and devour everything. You turn into a shark and magic harp your way down a mountain before eating seals. And that was the most WarioWare moment, and I literally cackled so fucking loud. It was great.
That intro was really fucking good. Because that was basically, I knew that there were like moments where you were a cat. Like I saw a trailer for this a while back, but I had just kind of assumed that it was kind of like a magical journey and like we're going to slowly discover powers and stuff. And I didn't really, full candidness, I did not fully realize that the girl died. Until chat went up and there she goes. She died. I go, oh, I guess she did. That was a hallucination there, wasn't it? That makes more sense now, doesn't it? Like I would have clicked on it as soon as the next level, you know, booted up, and I realized that it is just watching your elderly family die, or not elderly family, but your elders die one after the other, and yeah.
It's a collectathon where the Power Stars are the Joestar family curse. You have to go through. I really like the device of the fact that each ancestor gets their room sealed away, and you have to go in through like the peepholes just to identify. Like there's a lot of really poignant stuff in that within that. And
also, the house design is so fucking clutch.
Yeah, and like the fact that they just keep adding to this house to like preserve the memories of you know those who came before. Like the way that the environment ends up working out with that is really fucking great, and like it's really satisfying to like discover the secret passages and go through the twists and turns that lead you to each little family member's memorial, and going into the narrative micro games, going into some really interesting, often melancholy, often heartbreaking little moments, and yeah, maybe we should talk about some of those.
I was gonna say, let's start just kind of talking about. Well, first, I would like to clarify what I was talking about with the David Cage stuff, where basically you are forcing yourself to kill your family members, which is just brutal. And so, like, it is pretty comparable to like getting the finger cut off thing going on there. But like, the one that really broke me and a couple other people, because like I said, I streamed this. We had at one point one of our friends showed up friend of the podcast, Sam Borchardt. And he showed up in chat to watch Sam get killed by a deer. And wow, there's too many Sams here. I should clarify. Sam is Edith's grandfather, not my girlfriend Sam or friend of podcast Sam Borchardt, whose names I have already mentioned in this podcast. So he already had like an idea that like this is a game about watching people die. And he's like, this is weird. I don't know how I feel about it.
Watch people die the game.
And then the immediate person I went to after that is Gregory, who is a baby that drowns in a bathtub. And I started this and Sam's like, look, if this is where this goes, like if I have to watch you drown this child, I'm not sticking around. And sure enough, you have to play through it. You basically have to drown the kid. And it's really hard to watch. Like, it's one of those where you know what's coming. You know how it's going to go down. But it forces you to play it. It's still kind of sickening in that way. And the kid died. Sam goes, all right, that's it. I'm out. I can't watch this. I'm not in the headspace for it. And leaves.
So I gotta say that... the game makes you play as a drowning baby, and I am on record as not thinking too highly of children, particularly in fiction. So the fact that this game got me to empathize with a baby and see a baby as a character with like interiority and a world that I can get emotionally invested in beyond just like kind of the cloying, oh, we have a kid that we're going to kill like a dog to, elicit some sympathy from the audience. But like that in that little moment, like, and with what the dad says about him in the letter, and like just the way that like it's sad that he drowns, and you have this whole feeling of dread the whole time you're in the bathtub and playing with the toys because you know where it's going. But it's also strangely beautiful, like when he has his little like orchestra going with his duckies and you're tossing the frog around, and then when it finally happens, you're like, it's not like you have to watch a baby like float in the water, like face down, turn purple from the lack of oxygen or anything like that. You go into this like surreal, like dream world where you're under the sea and he's swimming around like with bigger versions of the animals before he finally goes down the drain. And that's that. And it's this really, get this nice like letter from the dad. And talking about like what he saw in his son who never got to grow up, and it's really fucking heartbreaking. It's really great in the worst possible way. Yeah, no, it's a lot. It's really what it boils down to. I did really like how the game kind of showed you what you needed to do, and because like you could basically just bounce around with this frog the entire time, but the music wouldn't play in the right way if you weren't doing it correctly. So like it was a really clever way of showing you what you need to do. I just, not necessarily as related to the death, but I just thought that was a really cool indication on how to proceed with the game, because there's a lot of open-endedness to this scene, but like you would feel yourself moving forward as the music would start to pick up and actually be a song as opposed to just kind of discordant notes. I mean, the way the sound design in this game is fucking great. And another instance that I want to talk about with regards to the sound is where the game the scene with Molly where she like turns into a cat and she talks about the monster under her bed. Like, it's clear that like, if not then, like, that was at least close to the moment of her death. But like, it's a little abstract. It's hard to it's a cool sequence, but it's hard to like feel it in your gut. As I said, I didn't even realize she was dying. Yeah. So the one that really got me is the one that immediately follows, the grandfather's twin brother who died as a kid. And you get the eulogy from, the child grandfather as you're just going on a swing. And this is really, I think this is one of the areas where the controller really enhanced the experience, because you had to use each stick for each leg to push yourself farther and farther. And like the creaking
Yeah, mine was just W and S. So this is definitely one where the keyboard is a little lacking.
So like you just hear the creaking pickup with all like, you know, grandfather Sam is delivering his eulogy and talking about how, you know, his brother always had his head in the clouds and like wanted to fly, and he wouldn't like wasn't going to let anything stop him. You just keep going and going until you launch yourself off of a cliff, go all the way around, and you just that steady back and forth of picking up speed, going closer and closer to what you know at this point is your death. And it's really, I mean, God, this one you even get like him like flying through the fucking air, like as he gets launched off the cliff, like you all but see him hit the ground. It's heartbreaking. And also,
if you got a fear of heights, it hits you in a big way too.
Yeah,
like you're watching this, you know what's happening. Your hands are getting sweaty looking over this cliff, and you're like, why would you put the swing here? What is wrong with you people? Why did you do this? And then it happens. Did you see, by the way, when you're walking around outside the house, that the swing is still there, coiled around the tree branch?
I saw the picture. I don't know if I noticed the swing itself, but I saw that like in pictures it was still coiled around the tree branch.
Yeah, no, it was there when you were outside. You can actually see it.
That is sad, but fits with the rest of what's going on in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so like what I really like. Well, no, that's getting too big picture. We still got to talk about some of the great moments. Sean, what were you thinking of? Where was the section where the keyboard and mouse really enhanced it? Because you mentioned that earlier.
That one is going to be probably the best sequence in the game. I have a tight contender for it, but a lot of people really like this one. It is Edith's brother Lewis, which we're gonna talk a lot about this one just for a lot of reasons. It's really fucking well done. And it's you know, him getting involved in this into his own imagination while he's cutting fish heads off in a cannery, and like you just play the whole thing trying to keep the fish head cutting and playing the game at the same time. The reason I think that the keyboard and mouse worked really well for this is because you continue to use WASD to play essentially the WarioWare micro game of his imagination while doing this, but the mouse serves as the hand. So like you're dragging it back and forth, clicking to pick up, moving it over, swinging it up. So like it feels very fluid to what he would be doing. Like, and you're actually using your full hand, gripping a mouse, which is a decent analogy for it. It works really well. Like you just get caught in this rhythm of doing it where it feels like you're actually holding that stuff. And this is also, as I'm thinking about it, where I really want to see this game in VR.
Yeah, that'd be super great, especially because, like, I mean, this was already pretty cool with the controller because it's like left stick moves the guy in Imagination Land, right stick moves the hand. But yeah, I can totally see that, like, having to click and grip and do all this stuff would really add a lot to it. And I particularly just like how so where I thought this was going, I think that the way that they ended up taking it was effective as well. But like how the imagination world like just slowly encroaches on the dull monotony. So where I thought this was going was I thought that like when the imagination world is like completely covered the screen, you can't really see like the blade anymore. Like he was gonna slice his arm off and like bleed out instead of.
Oh yeah, that's where I was thinking too. Actually, like that's why I was especially like with the mouse and keyboard, I was kind of getting nervous, but effective as well is like playing like you kind of start off in that place, but then like you just get so caught up in the imagination with him that you kind of forget about that risk and you just keep doing it anyway.
Yeah, and like
I'm doing it right now and you can't even see it. I'm recording a podcast and my arm is cutting fish.
Just don't get near the blade. Lot of blades because the great grandfather got his finger cut off and that leads to Barbara's death too. I don't know. But yeah, that whole sequence. again, it's kind of big picture stuff, so I kind of want to put a pin in that. But just for now, like the turn that I wasn't expecting was him like kneeling down and getting his crown from the prince or the queen or whoever you chose.
Man. I saw that blade like ahead of the because it's kind of hidden behind the fish head on the throne.
Yep.
But I saw it as I was walking in, like I just caught a glimpse of it, and I'm like, oh no, I know where this is going. Oh god. That was one of those where I even stopped and like ahead of it and just like looked up at the blade. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this, but you have to.
Absolutely fucking horrific. And yeah, I did not see that coming. And I think they know that you have that expectation that, you know, you're going to like this is going to be an accident. But the fact that he purposefully does it, plays into his character in a very particular way. And yeah, again, that's kind of the big picture stuff that I want to hold on to. So what are some other great moments, Sean?
I want to talk about Barbara, because Barbara is played as a comic book and is absolutely wonderful. Like they even got like the licensed Halloween music for it, which is absolutely incredible in this. The whole comic plays like really, it's a fun read. It's really interesting. It's great. And like, as I was doing this, I'm like, if I could, you know, own something from this game, I would love to buy a physical copy of this comic book, just because I think that would be kind of like a neat little macabre thing to have.
I wonder if they sell those.
If they don't, it's a missed opportunity.
Hell yeah, it is. Because I would own that too. I love the creep show narrator too.
Yeah. No, the whole fucking thing's great. I do have to say, huge disappointment. The girl's name is Barbara. Like, this is clearly supposed to be a horror thing. They have a narrator. They have people there. There's all sorts of stuff. They could have, and like the whole thing is that she was an actress known for her scream. So it would have been very easy to drop "They're coming to get you, Barbara," and then she screams, because that's what happens in the fucking movie, and they don't. And I was just really disappointed, mostly just because I really fucking like that line and that movie.
I mean, clearly they're not above like memes and references since they got the Halloween song in there. So they should have just gone whole hog. I completely agree with you.
I mean, like, it's already kind of playing into this pseudo fantasy of it, where like you don't fully know the whole story. But I think it, like just adding that in would just been kind of a fun little touch that, you know, is referential to other things that would feel very comic booky, but also, you know, maintain the horror of the situation. I like that a lot, actually. I like that none of this stuff is also big picture-y, but like I like that you can't really trust anything that fully happens here as like the whole truth of their lives and deaths. Like there's hints that it actually happened, like the swing, but like how the fuck do you know, go around on a swing? That's physically impossible.
And like some of them are more fantastical than others. There's like Molly and, you know, the comic book. And in the comic book outright, like Edith outright says like, well, this is tacky. Like, why the hell would, you know, Grandma Edie like put this here for her, you know, for her daughter. And I really, but what I really like about that moment is, I mean, just that observation that Edith makes, like, well, you know, Barbara wanted to be an actress, and like she was trying to like make it big again, like after kind of burning out as a child star. So like maybe the fact that she's been kind of immortalized in like a pop format like this, you know, maybe was more meaningful to Edie than I gave it credit for. And that was a really powerful sentiment to me, especially because I'm a huge apologist for like popular media and trash culture, like, you know, creep show comic books. You know, Hifumi was right in that Danganronpa argument about manga. But no, seriously, I really liked the way that closed out. Like after, like, because it is even in the context of what you're seeing, like the swing and even like the shark, like the shark and the turning into animals, that's weird, but in like an artsy kind of weird way. So like the comic book like horror jump is this really nice turn, and that like made me feel a little bit like, wait, what the fuck, like what is happening? But then like it still manages, despite being, you know, kind of goofy in a really fun way, like it still manages to like close on a really like emotionally resonant note, which kind of tied the whole thing together for me.
I think the other thing with the comic book, you mentioned like how Molly's death was super artsy fartsy and very, you know, like art game aesthetic. And then like Barbara's death was way more pop, honestly. Like it's very pop. I think that really kind of feels like the developers knew what they were doing with that, because it's basically saying like, we're not here to make an art game. We're here to tell stories and to present every one of these deaths in the same manner would be disingenuous to a character. Like if everybody was very artsy in that way, what would we be accomplishing? You know, it'd make everyone feel very homogenized. But by having this weird comic book one very early on, it does kind of set the stage for this is not an art game. It's not fully taking itself seriously. Like it's a very thematic and it's a serious game, but it knows what it is type of thing. Like it knows that there's more humanity than just death.
Yeah. And the kind of the specter hanging over it is very, you know, even though the format is more like, you know, walking sims are associated with like art games, like the actual content, I mean, I still think it's pretty literary, but but a lot of the presentation, a lot of the lingering questions about this idea of like the Joestar family curse or whatever is a lot more poppy. And I think that it's not afraid to embrace those elements, just ends up making it all the stronger. Yeah,
I mean, as I said, if something goes full art game, you know, there's a level of pretension that's just kind of associated with it, potentially rightly so. And so like to step away from that and say like we recognize what we're doing, but also need to we're doing something unique with it is important. And this is not a dig on art games. I like, you know, whole hog artsy games that are just art for the sake of art. They are incredibly pretentious, but I've played my share of them. And for the most part, I really dig them. Like that's obviously like our shit in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And like, yeah, so the way that each style reflects the individual character so well. Like, you know, with the Kite, like kind of the bratty, like 12-year-old kid.
I love the Kite.
The Kite was great. You know, like the baby in his own sort of like abstract kind of wordless world that nonetheless still very much has its own personality and interiority. And what I think that what was one of the most heartbreaking ones to me, honestly, was the grandfather, especially in the context of that Dawn like was there when it happened, and that because he was such a serious like military kind of guy, like that whole section is so much more down to earth in a lot of ways. Like there's less kind of the flourishes. It's just that one's probably the closest to what actually happened because you're, you know, documenting with
so you're even looking at photos.
Yeah. And so like the fact that like you're looking around with the camera, you're taking photos, the conversation between Sam and Dawn is very natural, very, you know, father-daughter. And so when you finally when finally you're kind of disentangled from the camera, when you're disentangled from Sam and Dawn is like, Dad, the deer is twitching, like, you know it in your gut, and they capture that, like, there's something like really fucking real and scary about like that moment when someone is still alive, but they're about to die. And the fact that the camera captures Sam mid-fall off this cliff as the deer like knocks him away, really fucking powerful and sad. That one fucked me up.
I mean, that's just this whole game, honestly. It's all of that feeling of recognition that these people are all alive and they're all very much about to die. Like the guy who got hit by the train.
Oh God,
that one was really rough because he lived in the fucking bomb shelter for the entire time, and then, you know, he got out. So if this is all I get, Walter's his name. If this is all I get, I'm happy I'm out. I'm happy I can see the world. And then he dies anyway. Like it's all just like that. It's all like weird little poignant moments cut short, and Yeah. Do you want to talk about your themes, your big pictures now?
I was gonna say,
Speaking
so now's a good time.
Pictures.
So here's another choice towards the end that I really like. So I know that I was looking at some discussion about the ending, and of course some people are salty that I mean salty's maybe too dismissive because this is like the game knows what it's doing, in that when you go through like Edie and Dawn's section where Edie's about to go to the old house and like, you know, get to the bottom of whatever, you know, finger quotes the curse is, and then just like completely like interrupts it with Edith and Dawn like tearing the notebook in half. I really like that there are no definitive answers. I think that's important in keeping the balance between sort of the poppy elements and the more literary elements. And I think that decision works really well because it got me thinking about like what are some of the things, like what are some of the ideas connecting these family members, and like if not a curse, if not like an actual like true blue curse, what is the thing that like keeps these unfortunate things happening to the family? Because like obviously they suffer a lot of tragedy, but like if you look at in the grand scheme of things, it's not like there's not that much of a pattern to it. Like in terms of like the deaths individually, they're just kind of the random unfortunate things in life, and the curse is, you know, you can think of that as like a narrative surrounding it. And so one of the things that I really see connecting all the family, and this was kind of solidified in the section about Gregory, where they were where, you know, Sam was talking about his like little internal world, his creative impulses, and all that other stuff, is that like most of these people are like creative people in one way or another. Like you have Molly, very imaginative, you know, Calvin wants to be an astronaut and like, you know, kind of expand beyond the bounds of his world and fly. You have, I mean, even Edith, the fact that, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later since I have some more thoughts on this, but even in like the UI, the fact that Edith is writing all this in a journal and making little sketches of her family, like seems very significant to me. And I think that this theme is really crystallized and really resonant to me in Sam's story and Lewis's story in a very like existential sort of way, because that hits home in like the I'm wasting my life away in this factory, like those, like honest, like the first thing I thought in kind of a dark humorous sort of way was that, like, you know, Lewis kills himself to be with his waifu, basically, and that is so fucking sad that he so clearly is this creative, like, cool guy. Like, you can look around his room and Edith has all these sort of nice things to say about him, and he's just sitting there, like, you know, going into the monotony, and his only solace is like what's in his imagination, what's in his head, to the point where, like, he feels, to the point where, like, you know, he feels like, since like what's in his head is just as real as like the drudgery of what he's actually doing, he may as well just be dead. And that's fucking horrifying. That's fucking really sad and really really, really real. Like, for anyone that has like had to work some like shitty dead end job, and like, I don't know, like that whole segment, like that cut to the bone at me in a very, very personal, very particular way, in addition to just being so well presented.
Yeah, that one fucking hit me.
Yeah, right? I mean, I think that, like, you know, I feel like in general, like, based on like my sort of interactions with people, they're really, it feels like there's kind of two types of people to me. The people who don't mind like the drudgery and are willing to like do what you have to do in order to like actually lead a fulfilling life on the off time. And then there are people who, if you're in the drudgery at all, like you're spiraling into a panic about like the time that you're wasting and like feel the need to, you know, maximize it at all times. And like,
it's almost like it's the people that have 3 separate projects running at the same time. Like if someone was running a podcast, writing, and has Twitch streaming all within the course of a week. I don't know what that says about somebody. I don't know what's going on.
A description that fits 2 particular people now in this very moment. But no, so like, yeah, like that, that shit was hard to watch. And what gets to me about Sam, like, 'cause Sam was the other, like that death also hit me really, really hard. And I think part of it is that like, we get a little bit more focus on him because he also factors into like Calvin's death. You kind of go into 2 separate rooms for him. The fact that like after Calvin dies, he just leaves his childhood stuff behind. And, you know, sort of the descriptions of him being kind of like a hard man, like a military guy who, you know, unlike the rest of the family, like kind of actively sought out death in some ways. But even he, like, even though he's very much like traditional sort of macho guy, like taking his daughter hunting and like wants them to be really prepared. Like you can see the strict like military kind of upbringing that he tried to give his kids, and, you know, in an effort to protect them. But he also, I mean, he was a photographer. Like, you know, he wanted to express himself in his own ways. He, even beneath kind of all that machismo, he had like a creative streak and a real like desire to sort of capture the world. And, you know, that ends up being his downfall too. Like creativity is what kills these people most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's even going beyond just creativity is what kills these people. I think it's the creativity in like, they mention a lot in a lot of ways that like it's the fear of death that is their own ending. And I think combining that with Jackson's idea of it's their creativity, I think they understand this curse to be upon the family. And so they have these ideas on how everyone will die. And like, they're like, all right, this is the most insane way this is going to happen. And then sometimes it's just absolutely banal. And so like this creativity and trying to protect their family and trying to solve these solutions is what ultimately kills them, because I mean, death comes for you either way. It's not going to just avoid you because you're like, haha, I figured you out. My brother launched himself off a cliff, so I'm going to go to war. You can't launch me off a cliff in war. Joke's on you. We can. We'll just launch you off a cliff by a deer. So,
oh God.
Yeah, it's really fucking dark like that. And I think it's engaging in a lot of ways in that, like, it plays on the idea of, you know, even creative people who come up with like these insane ways that they could die under the expectation of this family curse. They die anyway. Like her mother, you know, boards off every room trying to hide these influences from her daughter. The idea of this creatively coming up with how she will die before she just dies in childbirth. It's banal. It's what happens.
So with all that, are we ready to talk about the dying in childbirth, that sequence, the ending? Because I think we got a slightly different take on it, but I want to make sure that we're ready to bring it home.
Yeah, let's bring this home. Let's talk about the death of Edith Finch, and more specifically, what remains of Edith Finch.
Ayo!
It's her son. It's her son.
It's her son.
I had a really hard time when everyone's like, "Oh, that's what remains of Edith Chip." Edith Chip.
Edith Chip, the Crimson Chip.
But I had a really hard time when on the stream everyone was talking like, "Oh, that's what remains of Edith Finch." I really wanted to point in the screen and just go, "That's what remains of Edith Finch. That's Chappie."
That's Chappie. Oh no! All right, new headcanon. Her son's officially named Chappie. Good old Chappie Finch.
Oh yeah. So let's actually talk about the death of Edith, though, because obviously As you said, we have a little bit of differing opinions, and this is more like I mentioned that I got really emotional when she died. It kind of hit me in a way that I wasn't really expecting, but I know you have bigger concerns, and concerns are easier to vocalize than, you know, being like, I like it. Why did you not?
Sure. So we get, I mean, on a side note, I think, so we start with the birthing scene, which I think could have been really powerful if I hadn't played the Sonic Dreams collection and seen, you know, Big the cat getting birthed in that game and been reminded of that.
Yeah, no, I was in the same boat. Damn you, Polygon. Damn you.
So, you know, that aside, like, you know, we get, you know, the moment of Edith's death is, you know, dying in childbirth, and we go and we see her grave, and that's kind of the end of the game. Like, all she has left for her son is this journal that you've been writing. Like, another cool thing throughout the game is that the narration is the words that she's writing that sort of shows up like on the screen and throughout like the little narrative mini games that you keep doing. And so like I don't
they are micro games.
Micro games, of course. So like I didn't think the ending was bad per se. I was left to think about it, and I just don't know. I mean, I might just have like a fundamental like philosophical difference with this game, and we can talk about that in a bit. But I think what I first want to mention is just that Edith dies in childbirth felt a little disappointing to me, just because it felt like, of all these characters who they've done such a good job of giving individual voices, individual stories, individual hopes, dreams, desires, to, it felt like that we didn't get that much about her aside from just being our sort of vessel. And we talked about this, like in the pre-discussion too, and that like that might just be one of the sort of limitations of the genre, is that like in a walking sim, you kind of need a vessel to like guide you through the rest of it. And that, I mean,
even making her pregnant, I feel like runs the risk of you disassociating from the character if you're not fully invested already. Like, I can see any number of guys being like, well, I can't get pregnant, so, you know, I don't have that same style of connection to it.
Yeah. And so like, so yeah, there's a whole bunch of like genre concerns that go along with that. But really, like, what I felt like was that although I liked how Edie's story got kind of cut off, I feel like by the end of it, maybe agency is the word, I guess. I feel like I wanted Edith to have a little bit more agency, and maybe this goes along with some of my like fundamental, perhaps thematic discomfort, is that it seems like Edith's thing or her purpose in the end was to like find out and document like what happened to the rest of the family. But I feel like, I only played through the game once, so maybe there was like some foreshadowing or some subtle like characterization that I'm forgetting about. I feel like we don't super know like what it is about all this stuff that's so compelling to her, other than the fact that her mom keeps it at a distance from her. Which,
that's
is
all you need. Yeah.
That is all you need. That definitely, to be fair, but I still feel like I wanted more. That doesn't give me as much of a clear picture of Edith as an individual, compared to a lot of the other characters, so I could tell you a lot about their personalities and their individual desires and wants and hopes and dreams and stuff. And so the fact that like Edith has gone and documented all this stuff, and then she dies, like seeming like she's kind of perpetuating the curse and the obsession with death by doing this. And maybe like I can't help but feel like the game sees this as a sin of sorts, and I've got my own little qualms with that, but we can talk about that in a bit. So, yeah, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to say in response to any of that like spiel, but
I mean, my big thing, as I said, I think is it just a matter of kind of the game being at odds with itself, where it wants to tell a really comprehensive narrative about complex characters, but also create a character that the player can, imbibe, can become one with. And so like you kind of have to walk that tightrope of giving this being a character, but also not. Because like I could kind of I filled in a lot of her backstory on my own, where like I was like, all right, this is what I think she's like. This is how I think she would act just as a player character. So I don't know. I think it really does depend on how you play games. Cause like to go back to Danganronpa, you played that character, the first game as a character, like you really role played it. Meanwhile, I more went through the motions, enjoying the characters that I ran into, and wasn't as concerned with the role of Makoto in it. In this game, however, I kind of did the same thing, but I think I was more concretely aware of the fact that I was inputting my own ideas onto this character. And I think for me, there's something about that I like. I'm in the process, just to kind of give you a little part the kimono, so to speak. I'm in the process of writing a whole thing about how, Bloodborne and Dark Souls and all those games kind of have a narrative that's there, but there's a lot of pieces missing from it. And, you fill in the blanks with your own ideas. And I think that's a really interesting design philosophy. And I think that's something that I kind of subscribe to with how I play games anyway. Like I went back and read all the lore to all these games anyway, because I was curious what like the actual story is. But I think there's something to be said just to have you kind of fill in the blanks on your own. And so like with Edith, I think that worked in the same way. I think that I filled in the blanks of her life on my own with my own puzzle pieces. How did she get here? This is my understanding of it. And I think that kind of played in its own way. Like I filled her with myself. And please don't say anything about what I just said. I realize how it sounds.
Please don't talk about how Sean filled this 17-year-old girl with himself.
She's pregnant enough as it is. We don't need to continue on. But no, I think that's really what it boils down to for me. Is I think that it's a character that you populate as yourself, how you see fit. And I don't know that it necessarily goes against the story to do so, because it is kind of a personal story. It's learning about a family that even she didn't know about. So it is not unreasonable for you to put yourself in the place of this character.
So I definitely will say I'm going to meet you halfway here, because I really do like a lot of the moments where you get sort of small statements that you sort of extrapolate, like particularly when she's talking about the family members who are closer to her, like Lewis's bedroom in particular, like, he was really cool. I wish you could have met him. Or, if you go and you look at like the PlayStation or, whatever, like off-brand 3DO is in his room.
Oh my God, the PlayStation with GameCube controllers and Xbox buttons on it. Yeah.
Hell yeah. And she's like, Lewis, Lewis always liked to play games with me. He was surprisingly shitty at them, though. Like, yeah, like there's something about that statement that not only says a lot about Lewis, but says a lot about her. And I think that, or like Molly, it also struck me into like, because this is a thought that I've had about like, when you're digging around old like family stuff, like when she says about Molly, like she seems like, I always thought she seemed like the kind of girl I could have been friends with. Like that's a very loaded isn't maybe the right word, but it's kind of it's a statement it's a full statement with lots to unpack there about.
And I think that kind of really plays into the idea of Edith as a character as well, is you only get the window dressings in the way that she only gets the window dressings of the characters. It's looking in the peephole of her life. And so, like, you're creating who you think she is in the same way that she created who all these other people were before only seeing their death.
Yes. And so where I think maybe my fundamental disconnect with the game thematically comes in here is not so much like a fault in the construction, but probably what I just call like a philosophical disagreement, if I'm understanding correctly, is that the game, like a common theme, as we sort of talked about, was like, it's not just their creativity, but it's their creativity and like their, with regards to death and sort of the obsession with the family curse and like their own kind of mental hang-ups about it that end up like doing them harm. Like that's, you know, particularly with like Walter, you know, clear-cut example, he just wastes away under the house for like 30 years, and all that stuff like that. So then, you know, we have Edie, and I think that's sort of like the central conflict, is that you have Grandma Edie and you have Dawn. Like, you know, Dawn kind of wants to flee and like, you know, sort of like put the past and like the family history behind her, while Edie is very much interested in like memorializing everyone, like holding on to their stuff, like having a little shrine like specifically painted with their face on it. And that's like kind of the final conflict that they have before like Edie ends up dying. And so like, I'm not sure, again, just with the fact that Edith ends up dying in childbirth after all of the after all this documentation, after all this learning about the past and about all these people's lives. Like, to me, to do that, to try and like remember who you came from and who has been lost, I mean, I don't know. I think that's a pretty nice thing. I think that's a pretty noble thing. I think it's that's like, I thought the way that Edie, like Grandma Edie in particular, handled a lot of these memorials. I mean, I was definitely on her side. Like, I thought it was super interesting that, you know, the rooms had been mostly preserved and that like the people, even though the people are gone, there was still evidence that they were here. And like, I'm just left with this kind of unsettling discomfort that like Edith dying in childbirth, as she does at the end of the game, feels a bit like a narrative punishment to me for continuing that work. And I just don't know if it sits right with me.
I mean, I think this might be one of those occasions where the ends, like, it's kind of one of those things where they're kind of looking for like, do the ends justify the means? Because I don't necessarily know that it was written as a narrative punishment, despite the fact that it might come across as such. I think it was more just supposed to be like the final punch of the story of like, this is, you know, everyone dies type of thing. And it's, you know, written for her son, right? I think it's a son.
I think it's a son. We only really see the back of their head, so I guess we don't really know. But
I filled in son for whatever reason, so sorry.
They look pretty masculine at least, so
yeah, we'll go with son. If we're wrong, we're wrong. Sorry. But it does kind of end up, I guess, in your eyes, I can see how it might come across as more of a stinger for the sake of having a stinger at that point, because it doesn't necessarily play with how Edith's character or Edith's life had been up to that point. You're right in that it does play into the idea of her dying just to die. Like, it doesn't have the same impact. But I don't know. I think it might just be that I'm a sucker for stingers like that, and I think the ends do justify the means. Or it could just be that I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. I think you definitely have a solid argument. You're presenting a solid argument. But I like the ending. I think that's really what it boils down to.
No, that's totally fair. And I think that, I think that it is like, it's really powerfully shot. And like, it is like a great, like, stinger note to end on. Again, like, it's just the sort of thing where I'm like, in my head, I'm like, okay, I feel like if I'm reading this right, I feel like I really don't agree with what the writer's saying here.
I think that's just one of those things between I think it's a death of the author type of thing, honestly, where I don't necessarily know that the author intended for it to be read as her punished for her work to continue, because the story does seem to treat her as doing good work. Like, she is learning things about her family and pushing it forward. Like, I feel like had it not been presented where her child was reading her work, it might have been seen as not something positive. But, you know, with him reading it, it's presented as a continuation of her story. So I think that there is something to be said for that.
Yeah, and you raise a good point in that, like, because she's done this now, like the boy knows not just about her but about everyone else too. So, like, I think that there definitely is a way to read the ending as more positive in terms of, like, memorializing the dead in that way. It's something that, like, I might have to think about more, because I can see the argument either way, like, just based on, like, how we're sort of led to view each of the characters, and, like, this whole idea of, like, obsession and memorializing. It's interesting. It's interesting stuff to think about, if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, like, you definitely are making a very cogent argument, and one that has some solid legs behind it. But I think it's really going to end up being more of a personal opinion type of thing. Like, I don't necessarily know that there's going to be a clear-cut answer.
Well, I think that's a lovely place to end our little chat on, unless I'm forgetting something. No, I'm good with it. So, I mean, I'm not going to wrap up in the same way we usually do. This is a Patreon episode. Right. They know, you know what we're all about.
Yeah. So thank you guys once again for listening to us. If you are, you're obviously a patron. And if you are listening to this without being a patron somehow, what the hey? What happened here? I don't know what happened. But thanks anyway, I guess. I mean, you clearly cared enough to go hunt it down. Otherwise,
consider being a patron and get more of this hot content. Exactly.
Without the stress of searching for the episode on the dark web.
You know, get your beating a dead horse, a side of beating a dead horse with, like, your child slaves and your hard drugs on the dark web.
Yeah, like what the dark web is for, notably for re-hosting bootleg podcast episodes. Yeah, so thank you guys so much. We do really appreciate it. This was a wonderful suggestion, and as I said, if you are in the $10 tier, please suggest us more things to talk about. We will listen to your suggestions very closely. If you're in the $5 tier, show support for those $10 suggestions. If you have suggestions of your own, we'll also take them into consideration. If we have a month where we just have a drought of suggestions, we might do something from there. Or if one just jumps out at us and we're like, yeah, fuck everything else, we're doing that one, we'll do that one. But other than that, thank you guys so much once again.
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go